Unit 1. Diversity in the living world. Biology is the science of life forms and living processes. The living world comprises an amazing diversity of living organisms. Early man could easily perceive the difference between inanimate matter and living organisms. Early man defined some of the inanimate matter, wind, sea, fire, etc., and some among the animals and plants. A common features of all such forms of inanimate and animate object was a sense of awe or fear that they evoked. The descriptions of living organisms, including human beings, began much later in human history. Societies which indulge in anthropocentric view of biology could register limited progress in biological knowledge. Systematic and monumental descriptions of life forms brought in, out of necessity, detailed system of identification, nomenclature and classification. The biggest spin-off of such studies was the recognition of the sharing of similarities among living organisms, both horizontally and vertically, that all present day living organisms are related to each other and also to all organisms that ever lived on this earth, was a revelation which humbled man and led to cultural movements for conservation of biodiversity. In the following chapter of this unit, you will get a description including classification of animals and plants from a taxonomist perspective. Ernest Mayr, born on 1904 and death on 2004. Born on 5 July 1904 in Kempten, Germany, Ernest Mayr, the Harvard University evolutionary biologist who has been called the Darwin of 20th century, was one of the 100 greatest scientists of all time. Mayr joined Harvard Faculty of Art and Science in 1953 and retired in 1975, assuming the title Alexander Agassiz Professor of Zoology Emeritus. Throughout his nearly 80-year career, his research spanned ornithology, taxonomy, zoogeography, evolution, systematics, and the history and philosophy of biology. He almost single-handedly made the origin of species diversity the central question of evolutionary biology that it is today. He also pioneered the currently accepted definition of a biological species. Mayr was awarded the three prizes widely regarded as the Triple Crown of Biology: the Belgian Prize in 1983, an International Prize for Biology in 1994, and the Crawford Prize in 1999. Mayr died at the age of 100 in the year 2004. Chapter 1. The Living World. How wonderful is the living world! The wide range of living types is amazing. The extraordinary habitats in which we find living organisms, be it cold mountains, deciduous forests, oceans, freshwater lakes, deserts, or hot springs, leave us speechless. The beauty of galloping hordes of migrating birds, valley of the flower, or the attacking shark evoke awe and a deep sense of wonder. The ecological conflict and cooperation among members of a population and among populations of a community, or even the molecular traffic inside a cell, make us deeply reflect on what is indeed life. This question has two implicit questions within it. The first is a technical one and seeks answer to what is living as opposed to the non-living, and the second is a philosophical one and seeks answer to what the purpose of life is. As scientists, we shall not attempt answering the second question. We will try to reflect on what is living. 1.1. What is living? When we try to define living, we conventionally look for distinctive characteristics exhibited by living organisms. Growth, reproduction, ability to sense environment and mount a suitable response come to our mind immediately as unique features of living organisms. One can add a few more features like metabolism, ability to self-replicate, self-organize, interact and emergence to this list. Let us try to understand each of these. All living organisms grow. Increase in mass and increase in numbers of individuals are twin characteristics of growth. A multicellular organism grows by cell division. In plants, this growth by cell division occurs continuously throughout their lifespan. In animals, this growth is seen only up to a certain age. However, cell division occurs in certain tissue to replace lost cell. Unicellular organisms grow by cell division. One can easily observe these in vitro cultures by simply counting the numbers or cells under the microscope. In majority of higher animals and plants, growth and reproduction are mutually exclusive events. One must remember that increase in body mass is considered as growth. Non-living objects also grow if we take increase in body mass as a criterion for growth. Mountains, boulders and sand mounds do grow. However, these kinds of growth exhibited by non-living objects is by accumulation of material on the surface. In living organisms, growth is from inside. Growth therefore cannot be taken as a defining property of living organisms. Conditions under which it can be observed in all living organisms have to be explained, and then we understand that it is a characteristic of living system. A dead organism does not grow. Reproduction likewise is a characteristic of living organism. In multicellular organisms, reproduction refers to the production of progeny possessing features more or less similar to those of parents. Invariably and implicitly, we refer to sexual reproduction. Organisms reproduce by asexual means also. Fungi multiply and spread easily due to the millions of asexual spores they produce. In lower organisms like yeast and hydra, we observe budding. In planaria, flatworms, we observe true regeneration, that is, a fragmented organism regenerates the lost part of its body and becomes a new organism. The fungi, the filamentous algae, the protonema of mosses all easily multiply by fragmentation. When it comes to unicellular organisms like bacteria, unicellular algae or amoeba, reproduction is synonymous with growth, that is, increase in number of cells. We have already defined growth as equivalent to increase in cell number or mass. Hence, we notice that in single-celled organisms, we are not very clear about the usage of these two terms, growth and reproduction. Further, there are many organisms which do not reproduce. Mules, striles, worker bees, infertile human couples, etc. Hence, reproduction also cannot be an all-inclusive defining characteristic of living organism. Of course, no non-living object is capable of reproducing or replicating by itself. Another characteristic of life is metabolism. All living organisms are made of chemicals. These chemicals, small and big, belonging to various classes, sizes, functions, etc., are constantly being made and changed into some other biomolecules. These conversions are chemical reactions or metabolic reactions. There are thousands of metabolic reactions occurring simultaneously inside all living organisms, be they unicellular or multicellular. All plants, animals, fungi, and microbes exhibit metabolism. The sum total of all chemical reactions occurring in our body is metabolism. No non-living object exhibit metabolism. Metabolic reactions can be demonstrated outside the body in cell-free system, and isolated metabolic reactions outside the body of an organism performed in a test tube is neither living nor non-living. Hence, while metabolism is a defining feature of all living organisms without exceptions, isolated metabolic reactions in vitro are not living things but surely living reactions. Hence, cellular organization of the body is a defined features of life forms. Perhaps the most obvious and technically complicated features of all living organisms is this ability to sense their surroundings or environment and respond to these environmental stimuli, which could be physical, chemical, or biological. We sense our environment through our sense organ. Plants respond to external factors like light, water, temperature, other organisms, pollutants, etc. All organisms, from the prokaryotes to the most complex eukaryotes, can sense and respond to environmental cues. Photoperiod affects the reproduction in seasonal breeders, both plants and animals. All organisms handle chemicals entering their bodies. All organisms therefore are aware of their surroundings. Human being is the only organism who is aware of himself, that is, has self-consciousness. Consciousness therefore becomes the defining property of living organisms. When it comes to human beings, it is all the more difficult to define the living state. We observe patients lying in coma in hospitals, virtually supported by machines which replace heart and lungs. The patient is otherwise brain dead. The patient has no self consciousness. Are such patients who never come back to normal life, living or non-living? In higher classes, you will come to know that all living phenomena are due to underlying interactions. The properties of tissue are not present in the constituent cells but arise as a result of interactions among the constituent cells. Similarly, properties of cellular organelles are not present in the molecular constituents of the organelle but arise as a result of the interactions among the molecular components comprising the organelle. These interactions result in emergent properties at higher levels of organization. This phenomena is true in the hierarchy of organizational complexity at all levels. Therefore, we can say that living organisms are self-replicating, evolving, and self-regulating interactive systems capable of responding to external stimuli. Biology is the story of life on earth. Biology is the story of evolution of living organisms on earth. All living organisms, present, past, and future, are linked to one another by the sharing of the common genetic material, but to varying degree. 1.2 Diversity in the living world. If you look around, you will see a large variety of living organisms, be it potted plants, insects, birds, your pets, or other animals and plants. There are also several organisms that you cannot see with your naked eye, but they are all around you. If you were to increase the area that you make the observation in, the range and variety of organisms that you see would increase. Obviously, If you were to visit a dense forest, you would probably see a much greater number and kinds of living organisms in it. Each different kinds of plants, animals or organism that you see represents a species. The number of species that are known and described range between 1.7 to 1.8 million. This refers to biodiversity or the numbers and types of organisms present on earth. We should remember here that as we explore new area and even old ones, new organisms are continuously being identified. As stated earlier, there are millions of plants and animals in the world. We know the plants and animals in our own area by their local names. These local names would vary from place to place, even within a country. Probably you would recognize the confusions that would be created if we did not find ways and means to talk to each other to refer to organisms we are talking about. Hence, there is a need to standardize the naming of living organisms such that a particular organism is known by the same name all over the world. This process is called nomenclature. Obviously, nomenclature or naming is only possible when the organism is described correctly and we know to what organisms the name is attached to. This is identification. In order to facilitate the study, numbers of scientists have established procedures to assign a scientific name to each known organism. This is acceptable to biologists all over the world. For plants, scientific names are based on the agreed principles and criteria, which are provided in International Code for Botanical Nomenclature (ICBN). You may ask, how are animals named? Animals taxonomists have evolved International Code of Zoological Nomenclature (ICZN). The scientific names ensure that each organism has only one name. Descriptions of any organism should enable the people in any part of the world to arrive at the same name. They also ensure that such a name has not been used for any other known organisms. Biologists follow universally accepted principles to provide scientific names to known organisms. Each name has two components, the generic name and the specific epithet. These systems of providing a name with two components is called binomial nomenclature. This naming system given by Carolus Linnaeus is being practiced by biologists all over the world. This naming system using a two-word format was found convenient. Let us take examples of mango to understand the way of providing scientific names better. The scientific name of mango is written as Mangifera indica. Let us see how it is a binomial name. In this name, Mangifera represents the genus while indica is a particular species or a specific epithet. Other universal rules of the nomenclature are as follows. Number 1. Biological names are generally in Latin and written in italics. They are Latinized or derived from Latin irrespective of their origin. Number 2. The first word in the biological name represents the genus while the second component denotes the specific epithet. Number 3. Both the word in the biological name when handwritten are separately underlined or printed in italics to indicate their Latin origin. Number 4. The first word denoting the genus starts with a capital letter while the specific epithet starts with a small letter. It can be illustrated with the help of example of Mangifera indica. Name of author appears after the specific epithet that is at the end of biological name and is written in an abbreviated form. Example, Mangifera indica Linn. It indicates that this species was first described by Linnaeus. Since it is nearly impossible to study all the living organisms, it is necessary to devise some means to make this possible. This process is classification. Classification is the process by which anything is grouped into convenient categories based on some easily observable characteristics. For example, we easily recognize groups such as plants or animals or dogs, cats or insects. The moment we use any of these terms, we associate certain characters with the organisms in that group. What image do you see when you think of dog? Obviously, each one of us will see dog and not cats. Now, if we were to think of Alsatians, we know what we are talking about. Similarly, suppose we were to say mammals, you would of course think of animals with external ears and body hairs. Likewise, in plants, if we try to talk of wheat, the pictures in each of our minds will be of wheat plants, not of rice or any other plants. Hence, all these dogs, cats, mammals, wheat, rice, plants, animals, etc. are convenient categories we use to study organisms. The scientific terms for these categories is taxa. Here you must recognize that taxa can indicate categories at very different levels. Plants also form a taxa. Wheat is also a taxa. Similarly, animals, mammals, dogs are all taxa. But you know that a dog is a mammal and mammal are animals. Therefore, animals, mammals and dogs represent taxa at different levels. Hence, based on the characteristic, all living organisms can be classified into different taxa. This process of classification is taxonomy. External and internal structure along with the structure of cell, development, process and ecological information of organisms are essential and form the basis of modern taxonomic studies. Hence, characterization, identification, classification and nomenclature are the processes that are basic to taxonomy. Taxonomy is not something new. Human beings have always been interested in knowing more and more about the various kinds of organisms, particularly with reference to their own use. In early days, human beings needed to find sources for their basic needs of food, clothing and shelter. Hence, the earlier classification were based on the uses of various organisms. Human beings were since long not only interested in knowing more about different kinds of organisms and their diversities, but also the relationship among them. This branch of study was referred to as systematics. The word systematics is derived from the Latin word systema, which means systematic arrangement of organisms. Linnaeus used Systema Nature as the title of his publication. The scope of systematics was later enlarged to include identification, nomenclature and classification. Systematics takes into account evolutionary relationship between organisms. 1.3 Taxonomic categories. Classification is not a single step process but involves hierarchy of steps in which each step represents a rank or category. Since category is a part of overall taxonomy arrangement, it is called the taxonomic categories, and all categories together constitute the taxonomy hierarchy. Each category referred to as unit of classification in fact represent a rank and is commonly termed as taxon in bracket plural taxa. Taxonomic categories and hierarchy can be illustrated by the example insects represent a group of organisms sharing common features like three pairs of jointed legs. It means insects are recognizable concrete objects which can be classified and thus were given a rank or category. Can you name other such groups of organisms? Remember, groups represent category. Category further denotes rank. Each rank or taxa in fact represent a unit of classification. These taxonomic groups categories are distinct biological entities and not merely morphological aggregates. Taxonomical studies of all known organisms have led to the development of common categories such as kingdom, phylum or division in bracket for plants, class, order, family, genus and species. All organisms including those in the plant and animal kingdoms have species as the lowest category. Now the question you may ask is how to place an organism in various categories. The basic requirement is the knowledge of character of an individual or organisms of organisms. This helps in identifying similarities and dissimilarities among the individuals of the same kind of organisms as well as other kinds of organisms. 1.3.1 Species. Taxonomic studies consider a group of individual organisms with fundamental similarities as a species. One should be able to distinguish one species from the other closely related species based on the distinct morphological differences. Let us consider Mangifera indica, Solanum tubersum in bracket potato and Panthera leo in bracket loin. All the three names indica, tubersum and leo represent the specific epithet, while the first word Mangifera, Solanum and Panthera are genera and represent another higher levels of taxon or category. Each genus may have one or more than one specific epithet representing different organisms but having morphological similarities. For example, Panthera has another specific epithet called tigris and Solanum include species like nigrum and melongena. Human beings belong to the species sapiens, which is grouped in the genus Homo. The scientific name thus for human being is written as Homo sapiens. 1.3.2 Genus. Genus comprises a group of related species which has more characters in common in comparison to species of other genera. We can say that genera are aggregates of closely related species. For example, potato and brinjal are two different species but both belong to the same Solanum. Lion in bracket Panthera leo, leopard in bracket P. pardus and tiger in bracket P. tigris with several common features are all species of the genus Panthera. This genus differ from another genus Felis which include cats. 1.3.3 Family. The next category, family, has a group of related genera with still less numbers of similarities as compared to genus and species. Families are characterized on the basis of both vegetative and reproductive features of plant species. Among plants, for example, three different genera Solanum, Petunia and Datura are placed in the family Solanaceae. Among animals, for example, genus Panthera comprising lion, tiger, leopard is put along with genus Felis in bracket cat in the family Felidae. Similarly, if you observe the features of a cat and a dog, you will find some similarities and some differences as well. They are separated into two different families, Felidae and Canidae respectively. 1.3.4 Orders. You have seen earlier that categories like species, genus and families are based on a number of similar characters. Generally, orders and other higher taxonomic categories are identified based on the aggregates of characters. Order, being a higher category, is the assemblage of families which exhibit a few similar characters. The similar characters are less in number as compared to different genera included in a family. Plant family like Convolvulaceae, Solanaceae are included in the order Polymonales, mainly based on the floral characters. The animals order Carnivora includes families like Felidae and Canidae. 1.3.5 Class. This category includes related orders. For example, order Primata comprising monkey, gorilla and gibbon is placed in class Mammalia along with orders Carnivora that includes animals like tiger, cat and dogs. Class Mammalia has other order also. 1.3.6 Phylum. Classes comprising animals like fishes, amphibians, reptiles, birds along with mammals constitute the next higher category called phylum. All these based on the common features like presence of notochord and dorsal hollow neural system are included in phylum Chordata. In case of plants, classes with a few similar characters are assigned to a higher category called divisions. 1.3.7 Kingdom. All animals belonging to various phyla are assigned to the highest category called kingdom. Animalia in the classification system of animals, the kingdom Plantae on the other hand is distinct and comprises all plants from various divisions. Henceforth, we will refer to these two groups as animals and plant kingdoms. The taxonomic categories from species to kingdom have been shown in ascending orders starting with species in figure 1.1. These are broad categories. However, taxonomists have also developed subcategories in this hierarchy to facilitate more sound and scientific placement of various taxa. Look at the hierarchy in figure 1.1. Can you recall the basis of arrangement? Say for example, as we go higher from species to kingdom, the numbers of common characteristics goes on decreasing. Lower the taxa, more are the characteristics that the members within the taxon share. Higher the category, greater is the difficulty of determining the relationship to other taxa at the same levels. Hence, the problem of classification becomes more complex. Figure 1.1 Taxonomic categories showing hierarchical arrangement in ascending order. Species, genus, family, order, class, phylum or division and kingdom. Table 1.1 indicates the taxonomic categories to which some common organism like housefly, man, mango and wheat belong. Table 1.1 Organisms with their taxonomic categories. Common name man, biological name Homo sapiens, genus Homo, family Hominidae, order Primata, class Mammalia, phylum or division Chordata. Common name housefly, biological name Musca domestica, genus Musca, family Mucidae, order Diptera, class Insecta, phylum division Arthropoda. Common name mango, biological name Mangifera indica, genus Mangifera, family Anacardiaceae, order Sapindioles, class Dicotyledone, phylum division Angiosperm. Common name wheat, biological name Trichum astuum, genus Trichum, family Poaceae, order Poles, class Monocotyledone, phylum division Angiosperm. 1.4 Taxonomical aids. Taxonomic studies of various species of plants, animals and other organisms are useful in agriculture, forestry, industry and in general in knowing our bioresources and their diversity. These studies would require correct classification and identification of organisms. Identification of organisms requires intensive laboratory and field studies. The collection of actual specimens of plants and animal species is essential and is a prime source of taxonomic studies. These are also fundamental to studies and essential for training in systematics. It is used for classification of an organism and the information gathered is also stored along with the specimens. In some cases, the specimen is preserved for future studies. Biologists have established certain procedures and techniques to store and preserve the information as well as specimens. Some of these are explained to help you understand the usage of these aids. 1.4.1 Herbarium. Herbarium is a storehouse of collected plants specimens that are dried, pressed and preserved on sheets. Further, these sheets are arranged according to a universally accepted systems of classification. These specimens along with their descriptions on herbarium sheets become a storehouse or repository for future use. Figure 1.2. The herbarium sheets also carry a label providing information about date and place of collection, English, local and botanical names, family, collectors' names, etc. Herbaria also serve as a quick referral systems in taxonomical studies. 1.4.2 Botanical gardens. These specialized gardens have collections of living plants for reference. Plant species in these gardens are grown for identification purpose and each plant is labeled indicating its botanical scientific name and its family. The famous botanical gardens are at Kew England, Indian Botanical Garden Howrah India and at National Botanical Research Institute Lucknow India. 1.4.3 Museum. Biological museums are generally set up in educational institutes such as schools and colleges. Museums have collections of preserved plants and animals specimens for study and reference. Specimens are preserved in the containers or jars in preservative solutions. Plants and animal specimens may also be preserved as dry specimens. Insects are preserved in insect boxes after collecting, killing and pinning. Larger animals like birds and mammals are usually stuffed and preserved. Museums often have collections of skeleton of animals too. 1.4.4 Zoological parks. These are the places where wild animals are kept in protected environments under human care and which enable us to learn about the food habits and behavior. All animals in a zoo are provided as far as possible the conditions similar to their natural habitats. Children love visiting these parks commonly called zoos. Figure 1.3. Figure 1.3 pictures showing animals in different zoological parks of India. 1.4.5 Key. Key is another taxonomical aid used for identification of plants and animals based on the similarities and dissimilarities. The keys are based on the contrasting characters generally in a pair called couplet. It represents the choice made between two opposite options. This results in acceptance of only one and rejections of the other. Each statement in the key is called a lead. Separate taxonomic keys are required for each taxonomic categories, such as a family, genus, and species for identification purpose. Keys are generally analytical in nature. Flora, manuals, monographs, and catalog are some other means of recording descriptions. They also help in the correct identification. Flora contains the actual account of habitat and distribution of plants of a given area. These provide the index to the plant species found in a particular area. Manuals are useful in the providing information for identification of names of species found in an area. Monographs contain information on any one taxon. Summary: the living world is rich in variety. Millions of plants and animals have been identified and described, but a large numbers still remain unknown. The very range of organisms in terms of size, color, habitat, physiological and morphological features make us seek the defining characteristic of living organisms. In order to facilitate the study of kinds and diversity of organisms, biologists have evolved certain rules and principles for identification, nomenclature, and classification of organisms. The branch of knowledge dealing with these aspects is referred to as taxonomy. The taxonomic studies of various species of plants and animals are useful in agriculture, forestry, industry, and in general for knowing our bioresources and their diversity. The basics of taxonomic like identification, naming, and classification of organisms are universally evolved under international codes. Based on the resemblance and distinct differences, each organism is identified and assigned a correct scientific/biological name comprising two words as per the binomial systems of nomenclature. An organism represents/occupies a place or position in the systems of classification. There are many categories/ranks and are generally referred to as taxonomic categories or taxa. All the categories constitute a taxonomy hierarchy. Taxonomists have developed a variety of taxonomic aids to facilitate identification, naming, and classification of organisms. These studies are carried out from the actual specimens which are collected from the field and preserved as referral in the form of herbaria, museum, and in the botanical gardens and zoological parks. It requires special techniques for collection and preservation of specimens in herbaria and museum. Live specimens, on the other hand, of plants and animals are found in botanical gardens or in zoological parks. Taxonomists also prepare and disseminate information through manuals and monographs for further taxonomic studies. Taxonomic keys are tools that help in the identification based on characteristics.